Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight we're diving into a true story travelers across Asia often whisper about. Hotels that look ordinary by day, but after dark reveal something else. They're cheap, easy to find, yet never easy to forget. Some guests check in normally, yet check out in ways no one expects. Before we begin, meet the people at the heart of this story. Ayesha and Daniel, two budget travelers who love chasing hidden corners of Asia, and Kai, a hotel night clerk who knew what guests were never supposed to see. Quick question, where are you watching from, and what time is it now? Across Asia, narrow guest houses and budget hotels cluster near bus terminals, markets, and busy streets. Signs promise heritage charm or special discounts. Locals pass them without a glance. Visitors step in without hesitation. Yet inside these walls, rituals linger, rules are whispered, and sometimes the night doesn't belong only to the living. Superstitions guide these places. Don't whistle after midnight. Don't leave mirrors facing the bed. Don't accept rooms with unlucky numbers. These aren't decorations or odd traditions, they're survival rules. People who've worked nights in hotels have seen enough to repeat them. Outsiders laugh at first. Later they stop laughing altogether. Aisha loved saving money. Daniel loved chasing eerie stories. Together, they took risks. When Kai warned them about discounted rooms, they ignored him. Kai had spent years watching cheerful guests leave pale and silent, refusing refunds, only asking for directions to the nearest exit. He knew what they didn't. Let's pause here. In Asia, there's something called a stigmatized property. If a room is connected to tragedy, death, or strange accidents, it often rents for less. Owners don't always explain why. Travelers think they've found a bargain, but those who've stayed in such rooms know the truth. It isn't luck. The hotel they chose looked plain enough, tall, narrow, squeezed between busier shops. Its sign flickered, paint peeling around the frame. Inside, the lift rattled, skipping certain numbers. Aisha thought nothing of it. Daniel joked about character, but Kai, who'd worked in dozens of hotels, knew missing numbers are warnings, not quirks. The receptionist smiled politely, slid their keycard forward, and looked away. Small things mean a lot in Asia. A smile can mask unease. Silence can hide a warning. Abusha noticed the hesitation. Daniel ignored it. Together they carried their backpacks upstairs, stepping toward a room locals would have refused without question. The hallway smelled faintly of incense, mixed with harsh cleaner, a scent common in older hotels. Aisha rubbed the door handle before unlocking it, a nervous habit. Daniel filmed for his travel vlog, mumbling about atmosphere. Neither of them realized that the smell wasn't just cleaning, it was covering something else entirely. Inside, the air was heavy. A mirror faced the bed, one edge taped over. Two drinking glasses sat upside down on a red paper coaster. Locals would recognize these signs as wards, rituals meant to keep something away. Aisha thought it quaint. Daniel thought it funny. Both decided to ignore them. Across Asia, hungry ghost traditions warn of nights when spirits wander freely, searching for places to rest. Families burn offerings to guide them, but not all businesses honor those customs. Hotels especially can't afford to close rooms. Some simply cover mirrors, tape corners, or place glasses. Guests never notice the difference. Kai had once told them, watch the housekeeping staff. If they never open windows, if certain rooms are cleaned too quickly, if salt or ash is left at thresholds, those rooms are avoided for a reason. Travelers rarely notice these details. They only feel uneasy or dream badly. That's the pattern. At first, everything seemed fine. Aisha checked her messages. Daniel uploaded a photo of neon glowing outside. Then the bathroom tap hissed, releasing water stained brown. Aisha frowned. Kai's words replayed, if the water runs dark, leave immediately. She laughed nervously, choosing not to tell Daniel. The night had only begun. Their room number ended with a 4. In much of Asia, 4 is avoided because it sounds like death. The elevator had skipped the 4th floor, yet here they were. Aisha noticed. Daniel joked, but numbers carry weight, especially in places where every guest leaves behind something. Sometimes memories, sometimes more. So remember this before we continue. Cheap hotels across Asia aren't always bargains. Sometimes the discount exists for reasons no one will explain. Tonight's story is about what happens when those reasons finally make themselves known. By the end, you'll have to ask, would you have stayed in that room? Aisha and Daniel had been traveling across Asia for 3 months already. They weren't seasoned explorers or professional bloggers. Just two young people chasing adventure while their savings lasted. Aisha kept a notebook where she logged expenses, bus routes, and hostel addresses. Daniel carried a small camera, documenting their trip with casual clips he hoped to stitch into a video someday. Together, they thrived on budget choices. They skipped chain hotels, preferring the kind of small guest houses locals rarely recommended. It wasn't just about saving money, it was about finding stories. Every traveler has a reason. Aisha wanted distance from her family's expectations back home, to prove she could manage on her own. Daniel wanted escape from routine, from long nights at a job where the fluorescent lights felt more haunting than any ghost story. Neither admitted it aloud, but both secretly loved the idea of discovering something strange, something no guidebook would ever print. In many ways, they were ordinary. They argued over where to eat, lost their way in busy streets, laughed about unfamiliar signs, but they also ignored the cautionary advice locals offered about unlucky numbers, mirrored rooms, or guest houses with too much incense. Superstitions, Daniel said once, brushing it off. Aisha agreed, though sometimes her silence was longer than his jokes. It's important to understand, they weren't reckless, they were curious, and in Asia, curiosity has always been a dangerous thing to carry with you into the night. Kai entered their story as a quiet thread. He had worked at guest houses across Asia for nearly a decade, always the night shift. While most people slept, he dealt with things guests never mentioned in reviews: phones that rang with no one on the line, doors that opened after being locked, elevators that stopped at floors sealed years ago. Kai didn't talk about ghosts directly, at least not to tourists. He talked about patterns. Watch the water, he once told a nervous traveler. Watch the mirrors. His advice was simple, but it came from long observation. In his world, survival depended on reading small details no one else noticed. He had grown used to silence. Guests rarely thanked him. Colleagues laughed at his warnings. But Kai kept records, small notebooks filled with times, room numbers, odd events. It wasn't fear that drove him, it was responsibility. He believed guests had the right to walk out alive, even if they didn't believe in what followed them out. When Aisha and Daniel crossed his path, Kai recognized them immediately, not personally, but as a type, young, curious, dismissive of old warnings, the kind of travelers who smiled politely at advice, then ignored it. He liked them, but he also pitied them, because in his experience, curiosity always met resistance, and sometimes that resistance wasn't human. So when he told them not to stay in certain rooms, he wasn't joking. He was begging them to listen. They didn't. Few ever did. The guest house they chose that night looked unremarkable. Narrow hallways, chipped paint, a flickering sign out front. Travelers across Asia know this kind of place well. Affordable, forgettable, and everywhere. The receptionist barely looked at them, sliding a key card across the counter before returning to her phone. To Aisha, it felt impersonal. To Daniel, it felt normal. But little signs marked it as different. The elevator skipped the 4th floor. The corridor smelled of incense stronger than bleach. A taped-over mirror sat directly across from the bed. For locals, these were warnings. For foreigners, they were oddities, maybe quirks to laugh about later. Aisha's notebook recorded the room number. Daniel filmed the cracked hallway light, mumbling about atmosphere for his vlog. They believed they were simply adding another story to their trip. What they didn't know was that this hotel had stories of its own, quietly circulating among staff, never written online. Rooms that never stayed rented, guests who complained of water running brown, a corridor light that buzzed louder when anyone walked alone at night. The receptionist's hesitation when she handed over the key wasn't rudeness, it was fear disguised as routine. But fear doesn't translate easily, especially when both parties pretend not to notice. That night, Aisha and Daniel stepped into their room without hesitation. They unpacked, laughed at the decor, and closed the door behind them. And sometimes, closing the door is the first mistake. Before the strange events began, everything felt normal. They showered, sorted their clothes, and planned the next day's route. Outside, city traffic thinned to a low hum, neon still bleeding into the windows. Inside, the air conditioner rattled, filling the silence with an uneasy rhythm. Aisha lay on the bed, scrolling through her phone, checking for Wi-Fi that lagged between bars. Daniel set up his camera by the window, filming neon signs. "Perfect for the vlog," he said. His voice sounded cheerful, almost too cheerful. The glass cups on the red paper coaster stayed untouched. The taped mirror reflected the room with a faint distortion, as if the glass itself resisted clarity. Aisha avoided looking directly at it, though she couldn't explain why. Daniel barely noticed. It's here we see the first cracks in their night. Not supernatural yet, just subtle unease. The faucet sputtered when Aisha tried it, releasing water that carried a faint metallic smell. Daniel brushed it off, saying pipes in old buildings often did that. She nodded, letting it go, but something about the warning Kai had sent earlier about water lingered in her thoughts. When they finally turned off the light, The room felt heavier than it should have. Not loud, not frightening, just heavy. Travelers often dismiss this as jet lag, exhaustion, or imagination, but heaviness in these hotels is rarely accidental, and once it settles over you, it doesn't leave. This is where their story leaves the ordinary behind, because hotels in Asia don't just hold people, they hold memories, and memories have weight. For Aisha and Daniel, the night began like any other, two travelers saving money, testing their luck, confident they could laugh off whatever unease they felt. They didn't know that entire wings of such hotels often remain unbooked for reasons clerks never explain. They didn't know that housekeepers refuse to linger in certain rooms, cleaning them faster than others. And they didn't know that superstitions dismissed so casually often exist because something made them necessary. The mirror, the taped corner, the number 4, the brown water, the incense under bleach. Each detail by itself could be explained away, but together they formed a pattern, and patterns in these hotels rarely end with a good night's sleep. Kai once said guests see discounts, staff see records. He'd flipped through enough logbooks to know when a room number repeated too often, tied to complaints, to unexplained departures, and yet those rooms were never permanently closed. Business never allowed it. Aisha and Daniel didn't know any of this. They only knew they had a bed, air conditioning, and a story to tell. And that's how Act 1 ends, two travelers lying down to sleep in a room no one else wanted. Tomorrow, their lives would split into before and after, but for now they drifted off, unaware of the weight pressing down on them. The first disturbance came quietly. Around 2 a.m., Aisha woke without knowing why. The air conditioner hummed, but the room felt too cold, colder than it should have. Daniel slept beside her, steady breathing filling the space. She rolled over, trying to relax, when she noticed something odd in the mirror. It wasn't a figure, not exactly, more like movement that didn't match the room. The reflection seemed a fraction behind, delayed by less than a second. She blinked, rubbed her eyes, and convinced herself she was imagining things. Exhaustion can trick the senses. Still, she turned her phone face down, unable to watch the glow bounce back at her. Minutes later, the water faucet began to drip, one drop, then another, echoing against porcelain. She pulled the blanket higher, too unsettled to move. Daniel shifted in his sleep but didn't wake. Aisha told herself it was nothing, old pipes, bad plumbing. Everyone says that about budget hotels, but when the drops quickened, sounding less like water and more like footsteps receding down a hall, her pulse raced. She stayed silent, fearing she'd wake Daniel and sound foolish. Yet something told her the silence outside their door wasn't empty at all. It was listening. By 3 a.m., Daniel stirred awake. He stretched, picked up his camera, and whispered about filming some night shots. Aisha wanted to tell him not to, but the words caught in her throat. He opened the door quietly, stepping into the corridor, promising to be gone only a few minutes. The hallway stretched longer than it had earlier. The buzzing light overhead flickered faintly, making shadows stutter against the walls. Daniel lifted his camera, filming the empty stretch. His lens caught something he didn't see with his eyes, a faint haze like smoke lingering where no incense burned. He walked slowly, counting doors. 2, 3, 4, then the numbers jumped, repeating themselves. He glanced back. Their door seemed farther away than it should have been. He swallowed, suddenly uneasy, and turned the camera toward the lift. The indicator above the elevator blinked steadily, stuck on a number that didn't exist, a floor between floors. He filmed it anyway, laughing nervously under his breath, as if pretending to be unbothered could make it true. Then he heard footsteps, not behind him, but above him, slow, deliberate, as though someone walked across a ceiling that should have been solid concrete. He stopped filming. When he opened the door back into their room, Aisha was sitting upright in bed, pale as though she had been listening the entire time. Neither spoke at first. Daniel placed his camera on the nightstand and avoided looking at the mirror. Aisha whispered that she had heard water dripping, then footsteps, though she hadn't left the bed. Daniel nodded slowly, admitting he had heard footsteps too, but from above, where no guest should have been. Hotels in Asia are built upward, floors stacked tight to maximize space, but this building was narrow. The top floor should have been above them. No one had checked in upstairs. They both knew that. Still, neither wanted to admit what it implied. The dripping faucet stopped suddenly. The silence that followed was worse. It pressed into the room, making the air heavy again. Daniel reached for the light switch, flicked it on, and frowned. The bulb flickered, buzzing louder than before. Aisha pulled the blanket tighter, her notebook clutched to her chest. She had scribbled their room number earlier. Now she noticed something unsettling. The ink had bled faintly, as if damp. She hadn't spilled water. The pages around it remained dry. Only the number had blurred. Daniel muttered that they should try to sleep, but his voice lacked conviction. They lay down again, side by side, pretending rest was possible. Outside, the hallway light buzzed like a swarm of insects. Inside, the mirror reflected them both, but in the reflection, Daniel's eyes were still open long after he closed them. Morning never came quickly enough in hotels like this. Hours passed in fragments, filled with half-sleep, shallow breaths, and the weight of unseen presence. Aisha dozed briefly, waking to find Daniel sitting upright, staring at the ceiling. His camera was in his lap, his finger hovering over the playback button. She asked quietly if he had rewatched the footage. He shook his head, but later curiosity overpowered fear. Together they pressed play. The hallway looked the same, flickering light, painted doors, but in the frame's corner something shifted. Not a shadow, not smoke, but a pale hand disappearing into a doorway. Neither had seen it in real time. The camera had captured what their eyes ignored. Aisha's stomach tightened. Daniel tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. They deleted the clip, thinking that might erase the unease. It didn't. Instead, the room grew colder. The taped corner of the mirror curled slightly, lifting away as if tugged by invisible fingers. Daniel covered it with his jacket. Aisha whispered a short prayer she remembered from her grandmother, words she hadn't spoken in years. Hotels aren't meant to keep guests forever. They cycle people through, day after day, but that night, it felt like the room didn't want them to leave. By dawn, the city outside began to stir, vendors rolling carts, traffic building, but inside the room, the air remained heavy, untouched by daylight. Ajisha and Daniel packed quickly, neither saying aloud what they both felt. Staying another night was impossible. They just wanted to leave quietly. Yet when Daniel slid the key card under the door to return it, the slot refused. He tried again and again. The plastic bent slightly. The door remained locked. Ajisha tugged at the handle. It rattled, but didn't release. Panic set in. Daniel called the front desk. No one answered. The phone line hissed, filling with faint static that carried a rhythm like breathing. Ajisha slammed it down, trembling. Finally, after what felt like hours, the lock clicked on its own. The door opened a fraction. Neither dared touch it at first. Daniel pushed gently. The hallway lay empty. They rushed downstairs, ignoring the receptionist's polite "good morning." She didn't ask why they were leaving early. She only slid a receipt across the counter, eyes lowered. Ajisha noticed her hands shaking. Daniel didn't. As they stepped into daylight, the weight lifted, but the unease followed, clinging like smoke, and neither could shake the thought someone or something had wanted them to stay. By late morning, they had moved to a different budget hotel, farther from the bus terminal and the night's noise. The air felt ordinary again, yet the previous room lingered like a pressure headache. Aisha typed a message to Kai explaining the brown water, the taped mirror, the stuck keycard, the breathing phone line. He replied within minutes, "Meet at dusk near the roadside shrine behind the terminal. Bring nothing heavy. Keep your phone charged. Do not speak loudly about room numbers where staff can hear." They spent the afternoon pretending to relax. Daniel scrolled through footage without pressing play, as if the act of reviewing might invite something back. Aisha made a list of details she could remember. Hallway smell, flicker pattern, the exact time the door unlocked by itself. At sunset, they walked to the shrine, where traffic hissed like wind over glass. Kai arrived carrying a thin folder bound with elastic, the way clerks keep paperwork they hope never to use. He greeted them softly and placed the folder on the low stone wall. "I don't need you to believe me," he said, "only to follow instructions." He opened the folder and removed photocopies, maintenance tickets, housekeeping logs, and a floor plan with one room shaded with pen. He didn't show them dramatic photos. He showed them patterns, dates, and the initials of night staff who quit within a week. He tapped the shaded room number and exhaled, as if naming it might wake something sleeping, quietly. Kai spoke without drama. Months earlier, a traveler had checked into that same room during the Hungry Ghost period, when offerings burn and doors feel thinner. The night clerk heard water running, then the line went silent. In the morning, housekeeping found the bed cold but shaped, the bathroom dry, the window latched from inside. The guests never checked out. Security footage from 3:12 a.m. blurred for 40 seconds, then resumed with the corridor empty. Management repainted, taped the mirror's corner, replaced the carpet strip by the threshold, and discounted the rate. Business continued, logs filled with small complaints, taps hissing brown at odd hours, phones breathing, keycards demagnetizing inside locked rooms, towels damp after dry cycles, corridor lights growing louder when someone walked alone. He showed them a handwritten note, "Open windows morning only." Another, "Do not move the glasses from the red paper." A third, "If water darkens, do not speak." None of these instructions appeared in guest materials. They were passed between housekeepers, the way people pass warnings to family. Kai pressed his hand flat against the photocopies. "Steady. Some places won't close a room unless the walls fall," he said, "so staff build workarounds. They aren't decorations, they are doors held shut. Aisha and Daniel listened as evening thinned the light, traffic sharpening like teeth. He offered two choices: leave now and forget, or return briefly to collect the camera and show respect. They chose the second, swallowing fear like medicine, together, carefully. They reached the building just before full dark, when street sounds thin and stairwells carry every footstep. The lift stuttered upward, skipping the same number. At their door, the corridor smelled faintly of cleaner, over something sweet. Daniel unlocked the room while Aisha stood half in half out, refusing to cross fully until the window latch clicked. Kai moved with practiced calm. He opened the window wide, wedged it, and placed a bowl of clear water on the sill. He set 2 incense sticks in a saucer, unlit. Breath first, he murmured, as if to the room, not to them. We are guests, leaving, we will not take anything. The air felt colder, though the unit remained off. The taped corner of the mirror lifted a little. Aisha gathered their things. Daniel retrieved his camera and spare battery from the nightstand. He didn't press power. He could feel the familiar weight turning unfamiliar in his palm. The phone on the desk gave a soft click, like a tongue against teeth. Kai raised a hand, asking for silence without looking, eyes on the faucet. A dark line feathered the spout, then cleared. He nodded once. Water's moving. Keep your voices low. Don't apologize. Don't challenge. Just thank the room and go. They turned toward the door together. The lock did not resist. It didn't help either. It sat weighted, as if someone on the other side leaned gently, asking them to stay a little longer. They thanked the room anyway, and the latch softened. The corridor had lengthened again, not by meters, but by feeling the kind of distance you measure in breath. The overhead light buzzed, then steadied, as if something listened. They moved as a unit. Kai first, Aisha in the middle, Daniel last. Daniel kept the camera in his bag, resisting the pull to document. Halfway to the lift, the indicator blinked a number that didn't exist. The doors opened to an empty car that felt crowded. Kai didn't step in. He pressed the button for the lobby, and the doors closed without accepting them. We'll take the stairs, he said softly, as if suggesting dessert after dinner. On the landing, a draft rose from below, carrying a faint, wet metallic smell. Keep moving, Kai whispered. No pauses. They rounded the turn and found another corridor where a wall should have been. Doors lined it, all painted the same bone white, none with peepholes. At the far end, a mirror waited, taped at one corner. He raised his hand again, palm outward, and spoke like staff do when apologizing for inconvenience. We're finished here. Thank you for the room. Please keep what belongs to you. We're leaving what belongs to us. The draft eased. The new corridor did not vanish so much as fold, like paper obeying a crease only it remembered. They reached the real stairwell. Aisha checked her phone. Outside, it was evening. Daniels showed 3:12 too. Keep walking, Kai said. Some buildings bend time. They kept moving downward. They stepped into the lobby without using the lift. The receptionist looked up, then quickly down, as if relieved to see them alive. Kai didn't stop at the desk. He guided them outside, around the corner, into a narrow lane where delivery carts sat stacked like folded ribs. Only there did he exhale. Buildings remember, he said. Some rooms hold what hasn't finished leaving. Owners won't close them. Staff learn detours. Mirrors are turned into lids. Glasses become weights. Water carries messages both ways. He wasn't being mystical. He sounded tired. When you thanked the room, you returned what you borrowed. Heat, breath, attention. It wanted you to stay. You didn't. Aisha asked if the missing traveler had died there. Kai shook his head slowly. Not in any official way. Sometimes people vanish by stepping into the wrong hour. Sometimes a room loses track and keeps them as a shape. Daniel's hands shook. He gripped the camera as if it might fall through his fingers. A delivery truck rumbled past, anchoring the street back in daytime. They walked to the shrine to leave the promised offering. 2 sticks of incense, the bowl of water, a folded thanks. No drama, no spectacle, just respect. The city felt normal again, though they understood that normal was a surface, not a depth. Kai smiled for the first time. Now you can go, he said, but remember which doors you choose. Some hotels invite you back. Wiser travelers don't stay after dark anymore. The following night, Aisha and Daniel stayed in a different guest house, one recommended by fellow travelers. The decor was bland, the sheets thin, but the room felt blissfully ordinary. No taped mirrors, no unexplained water, just the faint scent of detergent and the sound of traffic outside. Yet sleep did not come easily. Every time the air conditioner clicked, Aisha jolted awake, afraid of footsteps. Every time Daniel checked his camera, he hesitated, unwilling to press play. Travel had always felt like freedom to them, a chance to live beyond their routines. But now the very idea of budget hotels felt poisoned. They realized how little they truly understood about the places they chose. Aisha's notebook remained closed that night. Daniel set his camera on the floor, lens covered, as though silencing an eye that had seen too much. Even in safety, the weight of the previous night pressed against them. Hotels are built to cycle strangers endlessly, but they had discovered what happens when a room refuses to let go. For the first time, both of them wondered if travel was worth the risk of stumbling into places that kept more than memories. Kai returned to his own night shift the following evening, answering calls, filing paperwork, and watching guests step into rooms without hesitation. He never told management what he had done with Oisha and Daniel. His job was not to challenge the system, it was to keep people alive quietly, efficiently. In his drawer, he placed the photocopies back in their folder, closing it with care. There were dozens like it, each for a different room, each with its own small rules written by staff who refused to speak them aloud. Kai sometimes wondered how many buildings across Asia carried similar archives, quiet warnings tucked between pages of receipts, slips of paper kept by clerks who believed more in survival than in explanations. He had no illusions about his role. Guests would continue to check in. Some would ignore superstitions, some would laugh at them, and a few would leave with stories they could never fully explain. But he knew most would never even notice. Most would pass through unmarked, unshaken. The dangerous ones were the curious, the travelers who wanted discounts, atmosphere, and stories. Travelers like Aisha and Daniel. Kai folded the folder shut and exhaled. For him, the night was still young. For Aisha, the experience became a shadow trailing her notes. She stopped recording room numbers, stopped chasing the cheapest options. When she wrote in her notebook now, it was with caution, as though the act of recording could draw something closer. She never mentioned the brown water again, but she bought bottled water compulsively, unable to trust a tap. Daniel found himself replaying that 3:12 moment in his head, even without the footage. The frozen time, the doors that folded into corridors, the hand caught by his lens. He had deleted the clip, but deletion didn't erase the memory. It lived sharper than video ever could. They continued traveling, but the joy had dulled. Stories were no longer curiosities. They were warnings, and the people who whispered them were survivors. Both learned to listen more carefully, to accept when locals insisted on rituals, to thank rooms even when nothing seemed wrong. These weren't theatrics, they were survival habits. The experience had changed them permanently. Every new bed carried questions, every mirror carried weight. They were no longer tourists collecting adventures. They were witnesses to what Asia's cheap hotels sometimes concealed, and that witness couldn't be undone. Months later, after returning home, they rarely spoke of that night. Friends asked for travel stories, and they gave safe ones: bus rides, temples, markets. They never mentioned the taped mirror or the key card that bent in the slot. To speak of it felt like inviting it back, but certain habits stayed. Aisha never booked hotels without windows. She kept a bowl of water near her bedside for months, a quiet comfort she never explained. Daniel avoided mirrors in dark rooms, covering them with jackets or blankets, a reflex more than a choice. Occasionally, Daniel dreamed of the corridor, the buzzing light, the endless doors. Sometimes in the dream, Aisha walked ahead of him, other times behind. He always woke before reaching the mirror at the end. Trauma doesn't always shout. Sometimes it lingers as habits, as silences, as glances exchanged without words. For Aisha and Daniel, the story was not about facing a ghost, but about realizing how close the ordinary can slide into the unexplainable. Asia's hotels continued to welcome travelers. They simply no longer believed every guest checked out in the same way. Stories like this don't circulate in guidebooks. They pass quietly, through whispered advice at shrines, through warnings left half-spoken by clerks like Kai, through rituals families repeat without explaining. And the most unsettling part is how ordinary it all feels. Hotels are supposed to be temporary, safe, forgettable, but some aren't. Aisha and Daniel never confirmed what they experienced with anyone outside Kai, yet the details matched countless others: water darkening, phones breathing, mirrors taped, hallways folding, numbers repeating. None of these are dramatic by themselves. Together they are patterns, and patterns in Asia carry meaning. You could dismiss it all: fatigue, imagination, coincidence. Many travelers do, but those who work nights don't dismiss it. They live by rules designed to keep doors closed, mirrors covered, and guests alive, and they know which rooms to avoid. The lesson is simple. In Asia, when a room is too cheap, when a clerk avoids your eyes, when a hallway feels too long, listen, respect the silence, because some hotels don't want you to leave, and once you step inside, they don't always let you go on your terms. So what do you think really happened in that room? Was it simply bad plumbing, a tired imagination, and a nervous clerk? Or was it something deeper, something hotels across Asia quietly learned to live with, even as guests cycle endlessly through their doors. Ayesha and Daniel left with their lives, but not unchanged. Ty returned to his shift, continuing his quiet work, and the room remains, ready for the next traveler who thinks a discount is just luck. When you travel, remember the rules locals repeat. Don't whistle at night, don't ignore mirrors, don't dismiss numbers. They aren't just stories, they're survival. Would you have stayed in that room, or would you have walked away the moment the water turned dark? The choice is yours. Just know this, some hotels don't care whether you believe in ghosts. They only care whether you're willing to stay after dark.